All right.
We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies. This is the 80-20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
Welcome 80-20 Baseball Podcast listeners, the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass here. Coach Bo is here. I am with Coach Colter Bostick. How we doing, Colter?
I'm doing excellent, my friend. I'm down here enjoying some 100-degree weather every single day and still going out and playing baseball. So I'm having the time of my life. How about you?
I'm doing well. And I'll tell you what, that hot weather can be very beneficial for athletics insofar as your muscles get warmed up really quick. Now, on the flip side, you got to make sure you're staying hydrated down there so you don't have any of those issues. But I always like throwing in that warm weather. I went to the University of Texas on a recruiting trip, Colter. I know you're in San Antonio, so that's not Austin, but I was down there and I went to a recruiting trip and those dudes changed their shirts after warm-ups. They went out, did their warm-up routine, their throwing program, and went in and changed their shirts. I looked at my dad. I said, I don't know. Like, I'm cool with 110 degrees. Southern California, we get some 105, some 102s, and that was fine. I played football in high school, and there were some days where it got well over 100 degrees, and there was no complaining. But that humidity, that was a little bit different ball game, but it definitely helps with the throwing arm get loose. And I think throwing in cold weather never did my arm feel as bad. I don't know if I would have thrown in Wyoming. I know you're from Wyoming, man. I don't know. I would have needed a coach. Let me know when you need me to pitch and tell me a couple days in advance. I'll start warming up then. But,
yep. We have no trouble. We have no trouble getting the bodies going down here.
Yeah, it's probably interesting for you when you got down there. I know you're born in Colorado and in Wyoming. You spent time playing in Montana when you were younger. So I know baseball's not a winter sport per se, but I know that's probably been an interesting shift, and it probably cuts back on your practice time a little bit at the beginning, get right into things a little faster. But hey, thanks for being here, Colter. Again, episode 42 here. We are going to talk about, in this episode, this to me is a game changer. It's the ability to focus on the things that we can control, the things that are within our control. And Colter, we had some times right now where, depending on how much you let your mind run and how much of the news you watch, you could start thinking that you're up to the whim, that our lives are just completely at the whim of pretty much everything but us, right? Doesn't it kind of feel like it could be that way? I'm not saying it is. And I know for me, I'm 40. I've kind of learned I had some great. Ken Revisa was a coach of mine for 5 straight years from the time I was 17 to the time I was 22. I got hundreds of hours with the late, great Dr. Revisa. And his big thing was like, hey, so what? You can't control it. So you kind of I learned some of the stuff along the way. I know your philosophy, your mindset, your paradigm is the same way. We're going to talk about that. And I want to get your take, Coach. But before I do, hey, if you're not following Colter on Twitter, and if you don't have Twitter, just sign up just to follow one person. A lot of these things you get bombarded with all this stuff, not baseball, but just all over these accounts that, a lot of stuff is it's a lot of noise and a lot of clutter. But what Colter's putting out there, what Coach Bostick is putting out there on Twitter is really great, especially for baseball coaches and baseball players. It's positive. He's spotlighting his players, but there's things to learn from it. And you can follow him. A lot of you are already on Twitter. So if you are, and if you're not, sign up. He's at maximized_BSB, at maximized_B as in baseball, S as in sacrifice fly, and B as in baseball. Go follow him. And Colter has said before to me, he's told me, he's like, hey, I'm not one of those guys just pumping out stuff, just put out stuff. So he's not just randomly I got to have 5 posts a day kind of. Now, you do post things 4 or 5 times a day sometimes because you got 4 or 5 great things to share or some highlights of some awesome things you're doing with pitchers, but you're not just doing it to fill a quota. You're doing it because you got a lot of great stuff. So, okay.
I enjoy social media for what it can be. I actually literally just posted something talking about how social media can be a phenomenal resource. It can be a great place to have discourse. You can learn so many things, network with so many people. It can be great, but it can also be a massive dumpster fire and a cesspool of just negativity. And you can choose what you're going to use it for. And like right now, it kind of goes into what we're going to talk about is controlling what you can control. It's easy to go and use social media as a place to be consistently negative and try to pick fights and try to degrade and whatnot. Or it can be a great place where you can ask questions and learn. Or if you disagree with somebody, you can try and have a conversation, or you say, hey, I don't believe that what you just said is right. Well, all right, well, great. Tell me what you think and tell me why, and we can figure it out. But social media, I try to use social media as purely a positive platform. If I get something wrong, which I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, situation, I'm willing to admit that I'm wrong, or I'm willing to admit, hey, maybe I said that in a way that needed to be better. But that's what social media needs to be, is using it in terms of growing, not destroying.
Well put. And I think that goes with a lot of things like the iPhone or a Samsung Galaxy phone or whatever phone or iPad, or those can be outstanding tools of just such ease to quality information. But there's also easy way to fall into. It's very easy to fall prey into a lot of wasted time, a lot of things that are negative and things that can really bring our lives down. So it just gets in the kind of the end user. It's up to you. And social media can absolutely be a great place to get a lot of great stuff. And I know following you, Colter, is a great start. And I think that it's up to us. So the controllables. Now, if you're listening to this, you're going, well, I want to hear about spin rate and velocity and how I can throw harder. And hey, you can tweet Colter and he'll set you up. And if you're in the Texas area or not, if you're remotely, he'll work with you. I'm sure he could probably work something out or at least kind of guide you. And you need to contact him because he's going to get your spin rate better. He's going to get your velocity better. He's going to get your control and command better. He's going to get your delivery better. Those are all key things. He's going to give you a better chance to get a scholarship. But I don't want you guys just going, oh, we're talking about what we can control and more of the mindset stuff, because this is the game changer before you get to all those other mini game changers. And so the controlling the controllable, there's a great quote, Colter, that I can't really find exactly where it was, or if maybe I just was sitting there daydreaming one day and it came to me. It was basically around the lines of, it was help me know like what I can control and what I can't control, and then the wisdom to tell the difference. I know that's kind of a popular quote somewhere, but it doesn't, I'm paraphrasing and I'm probably butchering it, but it's basically like, give me, please, like say a prayer like, hey, I want the ability to know the difference between what I can control and what I can't control, because in our times right now, especially as we record this, we're still going through a lot of this COVID stuff. And there's a lot of people that can just say, hey, you know what? That's an easy excuse. I'm out. I'm checking out. I'm doing this. I got people in my family. They doing that. Like it's, I can't go do this. Well, why? Because of COVID. I'm like, well, you weren't doing that a month before COVID hit. So,
yep.
And it's kind of like a pushing off the responsibility. So Colter, controlling the controllables, give me some examples of how maybe that may look, or some things you work with your players on controlling and focusing on the things they can control to really just game change, and really massively move the needle.
So I'm thinking of it in terms of, you've got your in-game controllables, you've got your practice controllables, you've got your personal life controllables. You have to be responsible for yourself. That's one thing that I think a lot of people in general, not just athletes, really aren't doing a good job of anymore, is focusing on bettering themselves and taking care of the things that are within their realm of influence. They're too worried about the other things. They're worried about other people and what those people are doing and what those people are getting and those people's successes or those people's failures, as opposed to just like, all right, how can I better what I'm doing, or how can I improve what I'm doing? Is there a residual effect on other people? Potentially. Can it be positive? Yes. But otherwise, like, I need to control that which is within my ability to control, not dwell on the other things I have no grasp of. And so in terms of the baseball player, in terms of player development, I can't control to a certain extent. I can't even have an immediate influence on something like, let's say, spin rate or something like that. That may be just, and we're still learning a ton of stuff, but there are certain factors that we can influence in terms of grip, in terms of pressure, in terms of changing the way the arm comes through to create more whip, or how the extension factor plays into the way the ball comes off. But I'm not going to sit there and tell a guy, hey, you throw a ball, your ball is 1900 RPM. You're not going to be successful until you throw it at 2300. That's not within his control. That's not something that he can readily change. And so if he's only dwelling on, man, I'm 1900 when I need to be 2300, man, Jacob deGrom spins it at 24. Like, I can't do, like, no, man, that's out of your control. You need to use what you have, and you need to be successful with what you have, and you need to figure out what that means. How do you influence your pitches? How do you learn how to execute better? What locations are going to let your ball play to the maximum potential, rather than worrying about something you can't influence? That kind of thing is really important, because I get phone calls all the time saying, hey, why isn't so-and-so's velo up? Well, your son is 15 years old. He weighs 135 pounds. I mean, he hasn't hit maturity yet. Maturity is going to be the biggest thing, and you can't control when that happens. When he does hit maturity, is he going to get in the weight room and start building the muscles and building the body so that it can facilitate? Like, I've got a couple of kids right now that, yeah, they can throw really hard, but their bodies can't facilitate it, and it's an injury risk. So we're more focused on them getting stronger rather than them developing velocity, because the two are going to go hand in hand. So things that are within our control and how we're going going to be proactive about changing them. Another thing of controlling what is in our control. Like I can't control if I'm at practice what the coach's practice plan is. I can make do with what I've got. I can try to optimize my practice. I can optimize what I'm capable of doing within the constraints of that practice. But if I'm not the coach and I'm not the one setting the schedule, I can't sit there and get upset. I can either work harder after practice before, or I can figure out how to do something within. But if I'm not in control of it, I can't get upset and get deterred because of that.
Yeah, it's a real sense of peace when people, and specifically in this case, players, come to accept what is. Even coaches, if you're coaching athletes, sometimes you just have to accept what is and then get after it to improve those things that you can control. And you have to also first ask yourself, is this in my control or out of my control? Or is this something that has to do? It's one thing to like sit there and check out DeGrom and watch him pitch. But if every night you spend 2 hours watching highlights and you spend 20 minutes training, or you skip days of training, I feel like that's backwards. And that's my mindset. I guess I grew up watching Michael Jordan. I think we talked about this on a podcast. I grew up watching Michael Jordan because he was on, every game was on, TBS was on, WGN, and they would have the games on national. And I would watch, even as great as he was, and those teams were so great, I would never watch more than a quarter, and I'd be outside working on my basketball game because it was like, that's great, but that's his life. That's great. I'm not going to be Michael Jordan because I'm just me and I'm different, and I'm going to go do what I can do. So I went out there, and yeah, could I have worked on 3-pointers? No, I was more of, I had to work on my post game. And I don't know that I was any smarter, but I guess kind of innately was like, well, it's fun. I can watch everybody else have fun and success like DeGrom, or I can get after it. Now, that's one way of looking at it. I know you're talking about a lot of different things also in terms of that. There's also like the Colter, you got guys that are getting scholarships or getting opportunities to go play at some quality junior colleges, some quality Division III, NAI, Division II, and definitely some big time Division I schools. One of your players is looking at that on the outside looking in, and they're just so absorbed and mentally consumed with, hey, Joe got a scholarship, and it should be like, hey, Joe got a scholarship, but great. Now I'm going to go do my thing. I'm going to go train. I'm going to go in the garage and work on my split squat lunges, or I'm going to go work on my plyos. And so that, what's in your control, it keeps you kind of like, you're not sitting there reading and watching so much stuff about everybody else's. That kind of goes down to like, this world is really a lot of people, and we all get sucked into it from time to time. And some people permanently almost, it's like we're consumers. We want to consume instead of go produce. And I look at it like either we want to watch other people live, or we want to take care of the things we can control and go live our life to the fullest. It doesn't mean we don't pay attention to other people. I surely keep up with you. I follow what you're doing because I think it's awesome. And I follow things, and I keep touch with the news a little bit, enough to where I don't lose my mind. But I think that, how about if your gym, like right now, the gyms are closed, right? The COVID is hit. So, my gym is closed, or my team can't get, so what? What can you control? Is your garage closed? Or pull-ups? Is a pull-up bar closed? Is a baseball and the glove and the wall, is that closed up? Like, start looking for answers and start looking for solutions. Yeah. I think it can cover a lot of areas, but I'll tell you what, this is such a big thing.
There's a really big difference. And God, what is the movie? I can't remember the movie, but there was a quote of, I've never seen an animal in the wild like feel pity for itself. And it's like, you know what? That's
Ace
really
Ventura?
No, honestly, I think it was G.I. Jane or something like that. But it's a really kind of an interesting quote to think about. Like, I don't think I've ever seen a Major League Baseball player sit there and say, oh, woe is me, I can't do this. Like, yeah, you have bad days, but they understand that failure is going to happen. Like, there's adversity to it. You watch what happened during COVID and whatnot, and you see how many pro athletes said, well, I still have to get ready for my job, even though I can't go to my gym, even though I don't have my throwing partner normally. Like, and they made things happen for themselves rather than sit there and atrophy and worry about things. They went out and did it. And I'm very ecstatic to say that a bunch of the athletes that I work with did that. However, there were a select few that chose to use this as an opportunity, to the COVID situation as an opportunity to say, well, I can't do anything because other things are closed. I'm stuck. No, you're never stuck. You are never out of the fight if you choose to be creative and you choose to find a way to get something done. But it speaks a lot to your priorities. It speaks a lot to your mentality, whether or not you choose to explore every single option to find out what you can do. And going to the core concept of this conversation of the controlling the controllable. I can't get to my gym right now, but I can definitely knock out as many push-ups as I possibly can to maintain my strength. I can go out and get my J-bands out and make sure that I do them on a daily basis to keep my shoulder healthy. Like, I can do the things that I'm willing to do. But if I'm not willing to do it, then that's on me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Knowing what you can control and what you can't control. That should be the first question. Like we're talking about, just first question. And then go find answers and solutions. If it's something you can't control, hey, go find solutions, be proactive, go get after it. Okay. So even on the field, pitchers, or if you're a coach in a youth team, you have a shortstop, he throws the ball to his first baseman and first baseman drops it. I think it's important that what Colter is hitting on so well here is that this plays out in a lot of different ways for coaches in life. You know, if the pitcher, once he lets go of the ball, you know, if it gets hit, well, here's a good one. The other day, Colter, I saw a guy throw a 90, oh man, it had to have been like 97, 98. It was paint inside corner. It was righty on righty. The ball didn't have a lot of run, but it was firm. On the vertical rectangle on MLB.com, it was half in, half out it was so inner, definitely not even inner third. It was inner corner and even a little off. Half the ball was off the plate. And the guy smoked it for a home run. And I think the pitcher, his reaction, I couldn't read his mind necessarily, but it looked like he was like, hey, I did my job. I did what I could control. That pitch was where it needed to be, because I believe it was like a 2-2 or a 3-3-1 or 3-2 pitch. So he couldn't work around and waste a pitch up or something like that. Not say waste a pitch, but maybe use a setup pitch out of the zone. And so I'm like, that's a heck of a response. Maybe inside he was like, whatever, but it seemed to me like he was like, hey, I dotted the corner and the guy hit a home run. That's out of my control, right? As that happens in pitching, or you make a good pitch. Oh, who had the no-hitter the other day? Cueto, my boy Johnny. And Johnny's a cool cat. I was out watching spring training a few years back in Scottsdale, and I was driving with my best friend, my wife, his wife, and we had the kids in the car. We were in the Suburban, and we were driving through Scottsdale, where my buddy was looking at some houses, and we're driving through this nice little neighborhood not too far from the resort hotel we were staying at. Oh, in that same hotel, I was sitting in the jacuzzi with the Big Hurt. So my buddy and I, my best friend and I, were sitting there with Frank the Tank, Frank Thomas, and he's a cool cat too. That guy was really cool. So it's kind of cool because I'm not really a starstruck guy, but when Big Frank, the Big Hurt, came sitting in the jacuzzi, just us three, I thought, man, this is too cool because I grew up watching this guy. But we're driving through the neighborhood, and the guy passes me, and I go, I go, you guys know who that was? That's Johnny Cueto. And he got his backpack on, like his little string backpack. I don't know what they call those things, but I was like, that's Johnny Cueto. Well, I speak Spanish, right? In fact, a lot of my Spanish I learned talking to Dominican players, and I have a lot of friends that are Dominican players. So I roll back, I'm like, que lo que, Johnny? And that's Dominican is like, hey, what's up? Like in Spanish, in Mexico, they say like, que onda? But in Dominican, they say, que lo que? He turned around, he's like, what's up? Like he was the coolest cat. But Johnny, I saw the other day on the mound, and he handled it really well because this is who Johnny is. He's kind of it was a pop fly. You saw that, Colter? It was a pop fly, and I believe it was a left fielder. They lost his no-hitter because they lost in the Pence. Yeah, Hunter Pence lost it. He lost the ball, the fly ball, and he didn't catch it. And the rule book kind of says, and the baseball's kind of unwritten rules are like, that's not an error if he didn't really. And to me, I think if they lose it, you can make an argument either way. But anyways, Johnny Cueto lost his no-hitter on that, and he was cool about it. He was like, he didn't slam his glove. He didn't have a hissy fit. I'm sure he didn't go and cry at the pizza parlor after. And I thought that was a good example of, hey, he made a good pitch. He did what he could, and it was out of his control. You saw that? You know what I'm talking about?
I've seen the highlights. I've heard about it. I'm not as big of a fan of Cueto. I'm actually friends with a guy named Jason LaRue, who Cueto actually ended his career through a fight. I mean, I really can't speak a whole lot to it, but I mean, I know.
Not as cool as I thought. Man, Johnny, you're letting me down, Johnny. Okay, yeah. So.
But yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. And I mean, the idea here is, I mean, as a pitcher, it's a very hard concept. You can say it as many times as you want to, but that taste that is left in your mouth when you throw that pitch that you want to and a negative result happens, when you execute perfectly and things still don't go your way, it's kind of a hard pill to swallow, but that is baseball. And that's, once again, it's controlling what you can control. I did my job. I executed that pitch. He just so happened to either guess right or he got lucky and the ball met the barrel, things went awry. But I can't sit there and let that derail everything that I've done or everything I'm wanting to do just because one thing didn't go my way.
Yep. You know what? This is something I think is so, and I haven't ever talked about this, but this is how I would quantify success for pitchers and hitters. Pitchers, I would quantify success by the efficiency of their velocity. So optimizing their velocity, whatever they're capable of doing, trying to stay their velocity maximum, not overexerting, overthrowing, doing more than they can, but really trying to get the most out of the velocity, but hitting the glove. I would score it all by hitting the glove and how often they hit the glove, not necessarily how many hits and things like that they give up. I would go, because there's going to be games where they hit the glove more often, but maybe they give up 3 or 4 runs because the other team just had a phenomenal day. But over the course of the season, that particular action, they're controlling hitting their target, hitting the glove. So long as their stuff is quality, so long as they're taking care of their delivery and stuff, and they have good separation between their fastball and changeup. They got a little, their spin is pretty tight on their breaking ball, what have you, but hitting the glove. So also for hitters, if you hit the ball hard as a hitter and they make a great play, you just tip your cap. And I think that we got to, as coaches, we got to instill this control the controllables. So when you start off the season by saying, hey, the goal is to hit the ball hard, and not how many hits you have, how many times you get up there and how many times you hit the ball hard, how many line drives you can hit, how many 20-degree launch angle hits you can have. And with pitching, how many times can you pound that glove? Not necessarily how many no-hitters or if you give up 10 hits or no hits. Typically, they're going to be correlated, right? But you're going out there and you're trying to pound the glove, and if they hit a little blooper or they hit a ball that's a routine double play that gets muffed and turns into a 3-run inning out of your control. Well, I like the earned runs, unearned runs. I like that because it kind of what's in your control and what's out of your control. That's basically what baseball says.
I love the new, it's not necessarily new, but I love FIP. Like, I think that's a really interesting, hey, this is fielding independent. Hey, errors happen. Okay, we have to accept that. Here's a measurement showing me, hey, this was on me. Like, even if I did execute, maybe there's something that I'm not doing, or maybe my fastball really isn't as effective as I thought it was because my fielders are not influencing whether or not this number is getting really high. There's accountability within that same concept.
Yeah, FIP is a great one, Colter. That's an outstanding statistic for pitchers within their controllables. I mean, literally it's like, hey, what does the pitcher have control over? That's really why they developed that stat. That's a perfect example, Colter. Man, that's a really good one. And quality at bats is another one. And that's determined a lot of different ways. I know I have quality at bat system that I have. It can be, there's a little variation to everybody's kind of quality at bat statistic, but I like the quality at bat statistic more than necessarily, a lot more than batting average and things like that, because it takes into what they can control more than what they can't. So yes. So, okay, as we finish up this topic, and the controlling the controllables is something that we could keep harping on because it's that important. But as we finish it up, Colter, what would you like to add or finish up with, tell the listeners about this topic? If we leave anything out, anything that you feel like we need to hit on before we sign off here?
I think that we just need to make sure that we quantify this for what it is, or categorize this for what it is. Controlling the controllables is 100% a mental skill that needs to be trained. It can go down to the most basic elements of the mental game, which, as Alan Jaeger will talk about, is breathing. Is, man, rather than making an impulse decision or letting your mind get somewhere, just take a deep breath and just say, all right, is this something that I can influence, or is this something out of my influence? How can I turn a negative into a positive, or how can I salvage a situation so that it's a learning opportunity? But rather than thinking of this as a individual scenario, or thinking of this as anything outside of the mental sphere, you have to train yourself to be in a position to control your environment. You can't sit there, and if you allow yourself to be apathetic, if you allow yourself to always be negative or otherwise, when it comes time to really utilize it and need to do it, it's not going to be there. We're going to fall into our natural pattern of, if you constantly make excuses, you will always find a way to make an excuse. So we need to start training even our athletes. We need to start saying, hey, you need to control only what is in your realm of control. Don't worry about these other things. And if there's something that you're curious about, or you're wondering, and hey, is this something that I can control? Let's figure it out. But don't try to look for opportunities to turn things into negative just because you can't necessarily control or influence it. So I think by looking at things as a mental aspect that need to be trained, I think that's when we can start redirecting a lot of people and a lot of athletes.
I think it comes down to what you said there, and kind of tying it in maybe, or saying it a different way, is just being at peace with all the stuff in this world, which is pretty much a lot more than I think most of us, and players listening, and parents and coaches, a lot more than we'd probably like to acknowledge or accept kind of intuitively. But we just need to come to peace that we don't control a whole lot, but we have ultimate control over our lives and our careers and our coaching and our development. And so it's a mindset that you got to cultivate, Colter. I think that you got to cultivate it. That's what you got to do. You got to go out there and cultivate it. You got to cultivate it out there on the diamond each and every day. And I think you have to ask yourself, one thing that's helped me over the years to develop this habit, Colter, is say, is this something I can control? I literally ask myself, now I don't say it out loud, but maybe I do sometimes, but I say, is this something that I control or not control? And then if I do, I move forward. It's like, and if not, I'm at peace with letting it go. Peace with, hey, and that's hard. That's especially for younger players and younger people. And then remember that book I was telling you about a while back? It was So What? Next Pitch. I believe it was Brian Kane who wrote wrote it's a mental game baseball book. It was so what? Next pitch. Literally like, so what? Now it makes me think about the ultimate. We've talked about being present, being kind of locked in and not. And the ultimate of acceptance of non-control is you can't control the past. It's done. You can have a little bit of control over the future indirectly insofar as what you're doing right now in the present will add up and build your future. But you can't actually really go to next Thursday and do anything about it directly today. So the worry and this, plan, but take care of the present moment and how you have control over right now. Right now in this moment is what you have control over. And I think that's a great mindset, whether it's you go out there with your athletes. Hey guys, give me your focus right now because that chemistry test you have tomorrow, you don't have control over it right now on this field. Now, after practice, you can go home and study for it beforehand. You don't have to necessarily just focus on it once the test is here, but you're out here on the field, got your spikes on, you got your hat on, you got your uniform on. This is what you're in control of. You're in control of your baseball. We're in control of having fun, your attitude, your hustle, your respect, and things like that. And I think that's where it starts. But speaking of being here, I'll tell you what, being present, being here, Colter, thank you so much for being here. Again, you always have some great stuff to say. I love your attitude. I love your vibe. Guys, go follow Colter at maximized_BSB. B as in baseball, S as in sacrifice fly or stolen base, and then B as in baseball. So at maximized_BSB. Colter, thank you so much for all your wisdom that you have and just overall too, just your vibe, your attitude, and keep that great work going with all those players. It's been a blast having you here.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you again. And looking forward to the next round.
Definitely. You're a good guy. Thank you so much. And we'll probably have you back on here as the next baseball season starts to come around. Hopefully it'll come around on time. You've given a lot of your time, a lot of good stuff out there. And if you're in the San Antonio area, you got to get with Colter. And if you're not, reach out to him. If you're a pitcher or you work with pitchers, you reach out to him, see how you can work something out with Colter. I'm not just trying to plug the guy because he's on here. Colter is a guy that you want to try to get as much from and learn, or he can help you remotely, or say, hey, if I was a parent, I didn't live in San Antonio, I'd say, hey, how can I work out a deal with you for your time to help maybe analyze video and I'll pay you, things like that. I know there's a lot of options and I'm not trying to give you a business plug, but I am. You had no part of this. And if you're in the San Antonio area, get out there and see Coach Bostick. Awesome. I'm not going to endorse people I don't believe 100% in, and you're definitely one of those guys. So thank you for being here.
I appreciate it. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Hey, have a good one.
Well, I'll tell you what, it is always great to have Coach Bostick on here. Just a positive guy, like I said, and we need more of that in the baseball community. So it's great to have him on here and share him with the listeners. Go follow him. Now, for part 2 of this episode, we're going to break down part 3 of creating the perfect drill, or should I say, getting as close to perfect as we can. And again, I'm trying to give you the operating system, the steps to building a drill, so you can build a drill that fits your team's needs for any skill, any situation, any time. And it's not a, hey, I need to have 40 drills or 20 drills that I get from other people, but also does it give you the flexibility to fit your environment and your situation and your team and your players' needs. It also lets you understand how to build a wonderful or perfect or awesome or very efficient and most importantly, effective drill. And if you understand these 8 steps to building an effective drill, then you don't need to rely on other coaches. You don't need to rely on other players to teach this or other teams that you see doing it, other training facilities that you see doing it. You understand what it takes. So when you know I got to get this skill better, you'll know exactly how to break it down and build the perfect drill, or at least as close to perfect as possible. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. With that said, we're going to go through part 3 here of the 8 steps to building a perfect drill. Authenticity. This is part 3. How authentic is this drill? The key question here is, how accurately does the drill replicate game action? How accurately does the drill replicate game action? This is big. This is a big one. I think this is something when I go out to practice, I very rarely, I should say, see more than 2 consecutive drills, or even sometimes I don't even see 2 consecutive drills that accurately replicate game action. A lot of times I think the coach is trying to get creative with it, or they just didn't put a little extra thought into it to make it replicate game action. This is so important. Why would you get a team ready for a game and not train them to get ready for that game. And so we're going to talk about it here. All right, now I'm reading from the 8 steps, the drill mastery guide that I created that will be available soon on the website, or at the time of this posting, it may be available at 8020baseball.com, depending on how the rebuild of the website is coming along. Here we go. Now that we know, going back to section 1 and 2, where we talked about time allotment and relevancy as the other for like how relevant is the drill to moving the needle on the scoreboard and the team culture. And then part 2, remember we talked about time allotment, how much time to allot for each skill and each drill. That's important. Now, part 3 is the authenticity. So this is the slice of the pie. That's the authenticity slice. So now that we know what skills are most important, as we talked about in the last part, and you can see in episode 41, at the end, part 2 of episode 41, we talked about that. So now that we know what skills are most important and approximately how much training time to allocate to the acquisition of each skill, it's time to build the drill. Creating an authentic game-like drill allows for the skills to transfer wholly over to the game. Basketball legend Larry Bird once said, "I'm a firm believer in that you play the way you practice." Now, this phrase is in this comment and this quote has been passed around a lot of different ways, but it's very important to understand that what Larry Bird is saying, take it to heart. It's a very kind of bland statement, but it's so relevant and so important. Again, Larry Bird, a legend who got more out of what he had than maybe any athlete, or at least he's in the top tier, the top 99th percentile of players that got the most out of what they had. Most of their physical ability, they won more, they had more fun, and they carried teams on their back with nobody really, I don't remember anybody in basketball that had less that did more. There were players that had less, but they didn't do 1/10 of what he achieved and how successful Larry Bird was. Larry Bird said, "I'm a firm believer in that you play the way you practice." Larry must have had some excellent practices. In fact, you hear stories about it. There's videos out there of him practicing, and absolutely, he had excellent practices. Now, outside of sports, some teams that I think are probably the most, I've probably learned more from a team, or should I say a set of teams, than any sport. There's a team and a set of teams outside of sports that I've probably learned more about when it comes to coaching, to being a better coach, maybe even being a better person. And this is teams that are outside of sports. Nothing to do with sports. The Navy SEALs. All right. The heroic Navy SEAL, Marcus Luttrell. If you haven't seen the movie Lone Survivor, you need to watch that. It's a little bit graphic, so maybe with younger kids, but you got to watch that. Lone Survivor. I'm sure many of you have. So this is Marcus Luttrell. He is the main character, although there are an assortment of, there's a group of main people, real life people. Shouldn't say characters. These are real life people. Now, all of which actually were killed. And I don't want to give away the whole plot and the whole story. And this is a true event that happened. But Marcus Luttrell is a hero and a Navy SEAL. And again, I tell you what, I learned more from Navy SEALs training, more from Navy SEAL leaders than any baseball coach. And there's amazing baseball coaches. I've learned so much. I've been around them. I've studied them. There's just amazing baseball coaches, especially these older coaches that have been doing it that are like 60 and 70 or 50 years old, 60 years old, been in the game a long time. But I mean, there's so much good wisdom there. And even some of the young coaches are coming with a fresh perspective. Not always do they have all the right answers when they're young, but sometimes just looking at it a little differently can help solve maybe an issue, an acute problem that's been around for a long time. And I've been around a lot of great coaches. I've studied the great coaches from all sports. In fact, one of the first coaches I ever studied was Phil Jackson. I know that's an NBA, that's professional. He had Michael Jordan, so it doesn't always relate to baseball, youth ball, and without guys like Michael Jordan. But never have I learned, and I can honestly say this straightforward, and I'm never going to give it to you wish-washy. It's always going to be full transparency. I can say this with 100% certainty right now that I have learned more from the Navy SEALs, particularly Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, and more specifically even Jocko a little bit, more on the side. I've learned more about how to run a team, how to be a parent from him than I have any other coach from any sport. And so again, don't get caught up in it has to be a baseball coach we learn from, or it has to be a sports coach to learn from. Teams and leading people is the same across the board. Whether those are 19-year-old Navy SEALs, 22-year-old Navy SEALs, or those are 17-year-old high school baseball players leading people. Now, there's individuality to each, but they talk about that in the Navy SEALs. Every Navy SEAL is different, just like your baseball team. Don't fool yourself. It's the same. In fact, it's a lot more difficult to train and coach Navy SEALs. It's much more difficult, way more difficult. They don't have the luxury of guessing and kind of figuring out and half-assing drills. They don't have that opportunity. They don't get away with that. So they got to figure it out. And they have, in my opinion, they figured it out much more than any other sport as a whole. Now, there's definitely great sports coaches that have used a lot of this stuff or did it themselves, even though they didn't maybe follow the Navy SEALs. I'll tell you what, you can learn so much from the Navy SEALs. And that's why guy, one of my top coaching books, top 3. It may be the top one. I don't like to get too much into the rankings, but I can definitely tell you it's a top 3 coaching book. Leadership Strategy, and Tactics by Jocko Willink. It's a field manual version. You got to get that book. Get the audio book at the minimum. Leadership, Strategy, and Tactics by Jocko Willink. I'll tell you what, that book is phenomenal. Phenomenal. If you want some fancy writing, fancy words, it's not your book. If you want a bunch of fancy stuff in there, sound all cute, it's all about being in the trenches. It's all about being out there. It's all about in what works, not theory and all this other stuff. So with that said, Marcus Luttrell said, you play like you practice and you practice how you play. Okay, those are very simple words, very bland. Other people have said very similar sentences, but that's a Navy SEAL who's putting his life on the line, and he's saying you play like you practice and you practice how you play. So important. So keep in mind, if you're going to make a drill that doesn't replicate game action, then you're not practicing how you're going to play. You're not practicing like how you're going to play. Or as Larry Bird said, you're not going to be the player you are for the games that you need to be because the way you practice doesn't replicate, it isn't authentic to the game situation. Now, for years, many coaches have told teams an iteration of the following: if you practice poorly, you're going to play poorly. While it is understandable that coaches require their players to practice like they will need to play in the games, the coaches must also do their part to ensure that each practice is designed to closely resemble game situations. 4 years ago, I was consulting for a baseball team, and at every practice, the coaches led a ground ball drill. They set up a ground ball drill that had a significant authenticity flaw. Now, this was at every single practice. Now, they practiced twice a week. It was a youth ball team. A 10U team was out consulting for them, and the drill's major flaw involved requiring half the team's players to field ground balls. And now, again, this is just one example of I could go through dozens and dozens and dozens of examples. You guys have examples you've seen. I know it. You've seen it. If you've been out on a field at all, you've seen this. And this is what I want you to be able to see. I want you to be able to see this and then also see how you can build it better. So here's the flaw. The drill's major flaw involved requiring half the team's players to field ground balls at second base or at the second base position, then complete the play by making a throw to third base. Having seen the second baseman make that throw during a game only a few times in my 34 plus years of baseball, it's probably safe to say that this play was surely rare and extremely rare at the upper levels. A little bit more in youth ball, you get away with it because the secondary leads aren't as of great quality or as good a quality, and the speed of the runners isn't quite there. But really, it comes down to the reaction time. The players, the base running isn't as good at the college level and the pro level. Very rarely you can have a ball hit to the second baseman, and even more so now as the shifts come on with left-handed hitters. And the second baseman was making the throw to third base. This was half of the team. So half of the players were getting hit ground balls and they were making the throw to third base. Now, the team's coaches were really smart guys. They were smart and a good group. I enjoyed working with them. I had a lot of fun with them. Smart. They were good with the kids, but they simply needed a better understanding of what makes a drill great rather than mediocre. Now, these 4 dads had baseball experience, but they had jobs in corporate construction. They weren't really baseball coaches. They just did it on the side. They wanted to spend time with their kids, and I love that. I think that's awesome. Some of the best times I ever had were out on the baseball field with my father. That's okay. But what they needed was, and they were a little hard-headed on this, was me to come in and say, this drill needs to be a little bit better. All right, it's kind of like a founder of a company as it grows, and you hear this story a lot, founders of companies as it grows. They bring somebody in to run the business because what they were really good at was the product or the idea and the feel and how they wanted to relate to customers, but they needed somebody to come in and run the business side of it. Now, in this case, these were coaches that really liked their players. They were great with the kids. They had an understanding of baseball. They knew. There wasn't many rules they didn't know, but they didn't understand how to create a good drill in terms of the authenticity. They had the runner, or I should say, half the team positioned at second base, or where the second baseman would be positioned back there, and they would be throwing the ball across to third base. I'd much rather have them throwing the ball to first base or turning double plays. There's a lot more throws that come up, and that reverse pivot that is involved with the throw from the second base position out to over to third base, that reverse is not the footwork they're going to use as much. Now, I'm a big fan of being symmetrical with your athleticism, but it doesn't mean you're going to rep at the same ratio. ratio. So the symmetry may come a little off ratio. What I mean is a shortstop is going to field the ball, and then they're going to, as they field it, after they field it, their shuffle is going to be, typically mostly their throws are going to be to first base and then some to second. Very few or very rarely do they throw it over to third and home plate. They do, but I wouldn't practice those ratios evenly. I wouldn't be a 1-1-1-1 ratio. Okay, so it may not be an exact ratio to the game because they're going to throw in a season, they're going to throw 200 balls to first and maybe 2 to second. I'm sorry, 2 to third, like if you're a shortstop. And I'm talking about the runner that runs in front of the shortstop, doesn't read the ball very well, and he's kind of giving a free out. And when it's the lead runner, you want to get him. That's just a small example, but I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have done that drill because I asked them at the end of the season, I said, guys, did your second baseman throw out a runner at third base on a ground ball? And they said 1 time. And I said, now how many times a game do you think your second baseman fielded ground balls? And they said 4 to 5, 6 times a game they would field a ground ball. Some games they would get 2 or 3, and some games they would get 6 or 7. I said, well, those throws aren't all going to third. They only went 1 time all year. Then you need to spend more time making the throws they're going to make. Okay. We wouldn't have pitchers pitching sideways to third base. We wouldn't have pitchers doing spin pitches to second base with the catcher situated behind second base. Now, you might do it for a pickoff drill, but you're not going to practice your bullpens like that. At least half your bullpens, you're going to have them pitching off the slope towards the plate in front of them. And so that's what you got to mimic. You got to replicate. We could go on and on about that. So I want to get back to the reading here. Most recently, I was consulting for another team. And again, notice there was a glaring authenticity flaw. This time with the team's major hitting drill. Like the other coaches, this coach had an advanced understanding. This coach did have an advanced understanding of baseball. He was great with the kids. He was a lot of fun to work with, and he conducted overall, his practices were good overall. He was in a tough position as he was the only coach out there. He was coaching alone, thus making it difficult for him to see these flaws in his drills or take a step back and look at it from a 30,000 foot view, a 35,000 foot view, or to look at it from somebody with the experience of somebody who's been in the game quite a bit longer. But he was doing the best that he knew how to do. Heck, he was consistently right in the middle of practice with barely a second to take a breather. It made me think of what great business leaders commonly say. It's tough to work on the business when you're spending a great deal of time working in the business. That is where consultants and mentors can be useful. They're not bogged down by the inner workings, but rather have a bird's eye view of the organization. And at the end of the second practice, I sat down with the coach and shared my thoughts. First, I was sure to compliment him on how he treated the kids so well, and then we dug into the training drills. My main recommendation was that he was to make his batting practice drill more authentic, more game-like. He told me his hitters were swinging at bad pitches in the last few tournaments, yet during his batting practices, during the team's batting practices, the players swung 95% of the time, even on pitches clearly out of the strike zone. So to give some context here, the great Mike Trout, who hits the ball as well as anybody, the great Mike Trout swings at 38% of the pitches he sees. 38%. The coach also mentioned that his players were struggling to hit breaking balls and off-speed pitches during the game. Yet the batting practice that he was putting out there was very common. We talked about this in a recent podcast, consisted of 100% fastballs. Again, to give some context here, major league pitchers are throwing 53% fastballs. So if your batting practice is 100% at the major league level and you're seeing 53% in the game, it's not a very good ratio. Now, the other pitches are going to make up a variety of assortments depending on who's pitching for the other team and whatnot. And I understand when I say major league pitchers are throwing 53% fastballs, that's surely going to be higher at the youth levels. The lower down you go, the more fastballs you're going to have. I get that, and that's awesome. I think the pitchers should really learn to work that fastball when they're young, and I understand we did a breakdown on the changeup. The changeup is not a successful pitch for the most part. It's not as successful at the lower levels because the mound distance, the hand size, the batters on the other team, the slow bat speeds haven't been weeded out. So for those three things, those aren't a factor when you get to the 60-foot 6-inch. You got hitters that, especially when you get to good high school, college, definitely in college and pro, you're going to have good bat speed, and then the hand size gets bigger, so changeups become a lot more effective. So I understand youth baseball doesn't have as many off-speed pitches for a lot of reasons, but it's surely not most likely going to be 100% fastballs, especially once you get to that 10, 11, 12, you're going to start seeing some other pitches and some breaking balls and things like that. So it's good. And also, even if you just saw 100% fastballs and you were like an 11U team or a little league team and you were watching, and every time you went out there, the opposing team threw 100% fastballs, I still wouldn't do that in practice. I still wouldn't do 100% in practice because here's why. You know, once they get to high school, and again, this is hypothetical because we know an 11-year-old team or a 12-year-old team, there are going to be other pitches besides fastballs being thrown. But let's say there weren't. I would still say we know for a fact that high schools and colleges and the professional game, I just shared with you the data on that there's going to be a lot of other pitches besides fastballs. So why is our batting practice only fastballs? And why were these kids swinging at every pitch during batting practice? 95%, 19 out of 20 pitches they were swinging at. We charted it. And so they get to the games and they swing at 19 out of 20 pitches. Well, the thing is, the batting practice coach is closer. He's behind the net and he's probably serving up cookie cutter fastballs. The opposing pitcher is going to be a 12-year-old, a little lanky, going through a growth spurt, has an umpire, has the fans coming along, throwing different things. There's a lot more variables. He's further back and he's not going to throw as many strikes. So if you're swinging at 95% of those pitches, you're definitely going to be chasing pitches out of the zone. Now, there were a few more minor recommendations to the coach's credit. He listened openly and then adjusted his batting practice. His team's offensive production nearly doubled from that point on. And when I say doubled, like runs scored, because at the end of the day, that's all that matters on offense is how many runs you score, not how many hits you have, not how many stolen bases you have. Those all play a part, surely, but what matters is run score. Run scored, and that's why WAR is so important to baseball evaluators, player evaluators. The WAR statistic, while it's not 100% perfect, it definitely paints a better picture of how much that player contributed to runs scored or runs prevented. And at the end of the day, I see this stuff on Twitter a lot, like, oh, he got this many hits or his batting average was this. That statistic, batting average, should not be brought up at all, ever. Now, OPS has a flaw because its common denominator is not the same. All right, on base percentage is out of 1,000 or out of 100, where the slugging percentage is out of 4,000 or out of 400%. So there's a difference there. So there's an uncommon denominator. In fact, OPS they've used more. I saw it on TV the other day instead of batting average, which is good to see. It's definitely a better predictor of a hitter, of a player, and his contribution to scoring runs. It's not about getting hits. It's about winning the game and scoring. Well, on offense, it's about scoring runs. All right, and winning the game combines with playing defense and pitching and stopping runs and preventing runs. So that's so important that we understand this. It's not about who has the most hits. It's not even about who has the most walks or who swings at the first pitch. It doesn't matter. All that matters is the result. Whatever you're doing works to get. That's why the launch angle revolution, the launch angle and teaching hitters to drive the ball with a little bit more of an upward swing, not a pop-up, not even fly ball necessarily, but driving the ball, trying to get doubles instead of base hits. And they found like, hey, that's much more productive overall to scoring more runs. And that's the whole idea. That's the point. That's what offense is about. And if bunting reduces your chances of scoring runs, stop bunting, or at least bunt in very acute situations that the percentages are actually in your favor, which most of the time it's not. Now, I'm talking about as the players get older. Youth ball, you keep bunting because the defenses are a little shoddy or very shoddy. And I love the drag bunt, especially the lower levels all the way through high school. I love that drag bunt. Put a lot of pressure. Definitely in sacrifice situations, I'd drag bunt the heck out of it. Third baseman playing back, drag bunt, auto. I'd put automatic drag bunt. In fact, I would never sacrifice bunt. Unless it was ninth inning. A dude on the mound was pitching just amazing and runs were hard to come by. I shouldn't say I never would sacrifice bunt. It would be like I would sacrifice bunt one time for the average coach's 20, 25 sacrifice bunts. It would be in those very specific situations where it actually was beneficial and we needed that one run, and it would be late in the game, like ninth inning or bottom of the eighth, and that would be a straight sacrifice. But I would actually just teach hitters to drag bunt and use that or a push bunt. So they push it, getting it by the pitcher, getting it down the line as a drag bunt, or they're pushing it by the pitcher towards the second baseman, kind of in that Bermuda Triangle. It's called the Bermuda Triangle. Get a ball lost in there between the pitcher and the first baseman and the second baseman. I'm a big fan of bunting for base hits, and definitely a big fan of bunting for base hits when the third baseman's back or in a sacrifice situation. Now, we could go on and on about that, and I want to finish up this part about authenticity to the game and why it's so important when building a drill. You got to build an authentic drill. It's got to be authentic to the game. So here we go. Intra-squad scrimmages are the best choice to create an authentic game-like practice. They're the best. The intra-squad, not inter-squad, intra-squad. The difference between that is when an intra-squad, I-N-T-R-A, not I-N-T-E-R. Intra-squad is when you're playing your own team. Now, this is a little hard to create sometimes when you're low on players. High school, it's not a problem because you can bring players up. Your program usually has more guys. If you're a travel ball team, this shouldn't be that hard because you have usually, if you're a travel ball program, you have a 10U and a 9U and maybe two 10Us. You have a 9U, 11U. You can bring players up and down. You can mix it around. You tell me players don't want to come out there and get some more reps, pitch a few more innings and get some more at-bats. You'll get them down. You can put an intra-squad scrimmage together, and they are the best choice to create an authentic game-like practice. While I recommend using intra-squad games as part of your practice routine, there are some drawbacks. So we recommend coaches not use scrimmages as a sole practice modality because the training repetitions will be fewer than that of a well-constructed drill. I think that's important to understand. Really, the biggest drawback, intra-squad scrimmages or just scrimmages, are more authentic than any drill. They're more authentic than any drill to the game. They are a game. They're a practice game, but they are a game, so they're more authentic. Now, the caveat to that is, and why I don't recommend coaches only use scrimmages as a sole practice modality, is because the training repetitions will be fewer than that of a well-constructed drill. Drills add volume and repetitions, and that's super, super important. Game-like drills, along with scrimmages, will best prep your team for what they will encounter in the upcoming games. Yeah, so it's important to understand that scrimmages have their place and drills have their place, and it's important to understand. To me, as a coach, you have three really big things: creating a great team culture, or hustle. You put the players together. You pick players that are, hustle, good character, high character players, very respectful. They go hard. They play hard. They want to be out there. And then you install your discipline, your rules policy. You don't have a lot of rules, but you have rules. You don't bend on those. You hold kids accountable. I'm big on the tiered consequence policy, where each offense is comes with a greater consequence. And then the other thing is building awesome drills and building great scrimmages. And I prefer intra-squad scrimmages. I highly recommend that. So if you have that approach, you're going to be super successful. I think we overcomplicate it with a lot of stuff, and we want to learn about so many different angles that we can take. And I think as you get older and the players get more experienced and more advanced, that can definitely be helpful, especially like the advanced college, the advanced high school player, the professional player. You can get very nuanced with their swing angle, and a lot of the technology, but you don't need technology to run an 11U, a 12U team and be awesome. I'm not saying you can't use it. I think it's fun to use it as gamification, but you go out there with those three things, all right? You build a great team culture, and that starts by the players you choose, and then by the rules and what you set up, and the vibe and the compliments, the praise, but also the accountability for hustle and playing hard. And then you build great drills, and you build and facilitate great scrimmages, and you're going to be off and rocking. You're going to be off and rocking and rolling with your team, having a lot of fun, winning a lot of games, and really showing them a setup for how they should go out and live life too. Really attacking the problem and getting ready. If they have a job interview and the job is about X position, they shouldn't be studying all about Y and Z. They should really hammer down and understand X and get to know that. And whether also when you go to school, one thing I like about colleges is technical colleges, a lot of times they go a couple years of very intense. So like aviation mechanic, for example, they'll go 2 years of very intense training on aviation mechanics. There won't be other classes stuck in there or general ed classes. So that can be very beneficial. You want to be authentic to what you're going to be doing in the game. So your drills need to be authentic. Ask yourself as you're building it, is this authentic to the game? Is this realistic how a game looks? Is this something that occurs a lot in a game and this is how it plays out? So those are some things you can go with. Man, I could talk all day about this stuff. It's always great to have you guys here. A reminder, Coach Colter Bostick can be followed on Twitter at maximized_BSB. And I highly recommend you follow him. He's the kind of coach that we need more of in the baseball community. Also, we'll see you next Tuesday on the next episode. And until then, take care of yourself, especially your health. Take care of your family, spend quality time together, and go make the baseball community better. Oh, and lastly, if you wouldn't mind, please go leave a quick review on the podcast platform that you use, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify. It would be very much appreciated. Leave a review, a rating, or share it with other coaches, share it with your people that you know, and share it with your assistant coaches. That extra support would be great. I do spend a lot of time on this. I'm trying to give you a lot of good stuff. This is episode 42, so this is a lot of hours of stuff that I've put forth out here for you guys to help the baseball community. I love doing it. Love being here to be able to give that to you, and feel it's a calling of mine. But it would be nice to kind of push it out there a little bit. And I know every time I look at the numbers of listeners, the statistics on it, it's going up every episode. Love to see that. That fires me up. But I'd love to see if we could kind of get this out to more coaches, or coaches that your friends that are coaching, or your assistant coaches. I would love to have that. And at a minimum, just go on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Spotify or Google Podcasts and leave a review. And that would be much appreciated. I think that helps kind of get it seen by more coaches and whatnot. But it's always a pleasure being here. This has been Coach Bo. Take care.
This has been the 80/20 Baseball Podcast. Take it to the field.